Today is June 3rd, 2018. Our sermon topic is based on the Valley Divine Principle, and the sermon title is Authenticity, because we're always looking for authenticity in life. Does that make sense? Let's talk about Solomon, the wise tale of Solomon. Solomon asked for wisdom. God, at the opening of the temple, he built the temple. God had waited for that temple. David could not build a temple. King Solomon offered everything to build the temple. He built it, and when he was in there, and all the musicians were singing, just like a few minutes ago, it said a cloud descended in the temple, and that cloud was God. And God let Moses ask him for anything you want. Go ahead, ask me anything you want. And Solomon asked for wisdom. He said, here's what I want. I want wisdom to be able to guide the country. And so God said, well, that's a great request. You could have asked for gold or Yankees tickets, whatever you wanted. But you asked for wisdom, therefore I'll grant that to you. Anyway, this is a story of two mothers, right? A wise ruling. Now 2 women came to the king, King Solomon, and stood before him. One of them said, pardon me, my lord. This woman and I live in the same house, and I had a baby while she was there with me. The 3rd day after my child was born, this woman also had a baby. We were alone. There was no one in the house but the 2 of us. No witnesses. During the night, this woman's son died because she lay on him. So she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from my side while I, your servant, was asleep. She put him by her breast and put her dead son to my breast. The next morning, I got up to nurse my son, and he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning light, I saw that it wasn't the son I had born. Right? Because you know what? Because we can recognize our own children. Right? Even other people can't recognize their children. Like I always say, if there's a crowd, if you go to school and there's 2,000 kids there, you never pick up the wrong kid, right? You always get the right kid. You always get your child. Right? You never bring home the wrong kid. Oh, you look a lot like Israel. No. So the other one said, no, the living one is my son, the dead one is yours. So she recognized her child as her son. But the first one insisted, no, the dead one is yours, the living one is mine. And so they argued before the king. The king said, this one says, my son is alive and your son is dead, while that one says, no, your son is dead and mine is alive. So you all know this, how this story ends, right? Besides, how does Solomon resolve the riddle? There are no witnesses. The ladies mentioned there's no witnesses. There's no DNA test. How does he resolve the widow? The way he comes to the conclusion is he looks for what? Love. Authentic love. Only authentic love will decide who's the real mother, right? So he says, not meaning to do it, then the king said, bring me a sword. So they brought a sword for the king. Then he gave an order, cut the living child in 2 and give half to one and half to the other. The woman whose son was alive was deeply moved out of her love for her son and said to the king, please, my lord, give her the living baby, don't kill him. Right? Because parents would rather that their child live than be with themselves even, right? They would sacrifice their love for the sake of that child. So, but the other said, neither I nor you shall have him, cut him in 2. We would say that's a really Cain-like attitude, right? A really painful, angry, just cut him in half, I don't care. Just a really angry response to the death of her own child, which we can sort of understand, right? Your child dies, you're in great pain, she's in great agony, great emotional turmoil, and could easily make a mistake, right? If your kid got killed by a car, whatever happened, you might be in emotional turmoil and might make some emotional mistake. Does that make sense? I think it makes sense. I understand that lady. She has too much pain in her heart to make a reasonable decision. That's why they're bringing the decision to the king. Then the king gave his ruling, give the living baby to the first woman. Do not kill him. She is his mother. When all Israel heard the verdict that the king had given, they held the king in awe because they saw that he had wisdom from God to administer justice. That makes sense, right? The whole world is in awe that he could figure out how to decipher, how to understand who's the real mother. And the method, his tool was true love. Right? His tool was, the way he figured it out was the love of the mother. We say our vision of God is like the wise king that sees the authentic love of mother. Right? Follow it says, when God sees the authentic love of true mother, God's even pleased. Even God wants to dwell in that family. Right? So we say authenticity of true love. So I'll start with an interesting story about authenticity. It's just because I'm exhausted out of my mind, I thought I'd lead with an interesting story. This is from a book, How Pleasure Works. What makes us really happy? You can read it. You can pick it up at the library, bookstores by Paul Bloom. It's a very in-depth look at what actually gives you pleasure and why it gives you pleasure. What's more important is why it gives you pleasure, not what gives you pleasure. I'll show you. Everybody knows who Hermann Göring was, right? Second in command to Adolf Hitler. Hermann Göring was designated successor of Adolf Hitler, was ready to be executed for crimes against humanity when he discovered that a pleasure of his had been stolen from him. He had something pleasurable that he liked, and it was taken away from him. It goes like this. The evil theft was done by a Dutch painter and art collector named Han van Meegeren during World War II. He had tricked Hermann Göring, right? Göring had paid $10 million and traded 200 lesser pieces of art for a painting called Christ with a Woman Taken in Adultery by Johannes Vermeer. You guys know who Vermeer is, right? He made the girl with the earring. Beautiful painting. Yeah, with the pearl earring. That's a picture, right? This is Christ with a woman caught in adultery. Famous picture by Vermeer. And I like Vermeer's art, by the way. Anyhow, so here's what happened. Göring was a lover of art and stole much of his art from Europe during World War II. And of course, he bought it from the Dutch people, but he was tricked. Okay, so here's what happened. After the war, Van Meegeren was arrested and charged with the crime of selling great Dutch masterpiece to the Nazis, which was seen as collaborating with the enemy, and selling a valuable Dutch piece of art history was considered treason, punishable by death. So they said, we're going to kill you because you did business with Göring, who's a war criminal. Right? Makes sense. But here's what happened. While in prison, Van Meeren confessed to a different crime. And here's what the crime looks like. He said, in his defense of having sold a Vermeer to the Nazis and having aided and abetted the enemy, Van Meegeren pleaded that the work sold had not been a genuine Vermeer. Moreover, insofar as he had traded a fake painting with Göring for 200 authentic Dutch artworks, he felt that he should be regarded as a national hero, not a collaborator. The authorities refused to believe his claims. Right? So here's what happened. Van Meegeren told them that he had faked not only the woman taken in adultery, but also 5 other Vermeers and 2 Peter de Hoogh's, all having come onto the market since 1937. He also suggested that they take a close look at the man on the road to Emmaus, another painting, right, of Jesus. So here's what happened. He offered to paint them a Vermeer under the very noses. So he was an artist, and he faked Vermeers all the time, made millions of dollars, by the way. They accepted the proposal, and it was agreed that he would paint one of his fakes in the presence of the court-appointed persons and reporters, art experts, all of them, right? So here's him painting. He's in prison, and he's painting this picture, and they say, yeah, that's just like the one Göring had. You are a genius. You did trick him. So in prison, he painted like a maniac, and in 6 weeks, he recreated another painting identical to the first. The newspaper headline said, Dutch painter is painting for his life. And here's what happened, right? And yes, he was successful. He convinced the judge that he had tricked Hermann Göring. He had tricked him with a fake. See, there he is now. So he said this. New headline was, Dutch hero. Dutch hero Van Meegeren swindled the Nazis. It didn't say ha ha ha. I added the ha ha ha, right? So he became a hero. It said, Dutch Museum honors forger. What honors a forger? If you trick Satan, you're going to get a star. You're going to get a gold star. So He didn't trick Satan, he tricked the next best thing, Hermann Goering. Dutch Museum honors forger and art forger who sold a fake to the Nazi Air Force chief Hermann Goering is finally getting the recognition that eluded him in life because he was a thief, by the way. From a museum, he famously conned out of a small fortune those were all the other fakes he sold them, right? What's the difference, right? Goering had the painting. When he was in prison, he discovered that it was a fake, and he was sad, right? Why was he sad? It's exactly the same painting as it was before. What's the difference? Authenticity of the artist. That's what the difference is. And that affects us all the time. It affects how we see things. What we believe and what we see and what we believe affects us all the time. And I suggest you read this book and you'll understand many things about yourself that you didn't know before. People pay big dollars for authentic items. For example, the 70th home run baseball hit by Mark McGwire sold for $3 million. Isn't that interesting? It's not different than any other baseball you can buy at a sporting goods shop. In fact, it's a used baseball, right? In fact, it's been used already. Nevertheless, it's worth $3 million. How come? Because Mark McGwire hit it, made a world record. Other things. Or a baseball hit by Babe Ruth is still just a baseball. But if Babe Ruth hit it out of the park, it's worth thousands, if not millions of dollars, right? Original Declarations of Independence, which John Kennedy is always looking for at the thrift store, right? Always looking for that authentic art masterpiece. And sometimes people find them, right? They find an art masterpiece. There was a story about a guy, I think he was in Ohio, went to a yard sale, bought a cheap painting for $2, wanted to reframe it, and there was a U.S. Constitution, one of the 17 originals left on Earth, and he made millions of dollars from that discovery, right? What's the difference? You can get many copies of the Independence, the copy of the Declaration of Independence. They cost like $10 at a nice museum shop. But a real one, an original one, actually with signatures, sells for millions of dollars. What's the difference? Difference is our perception, our value of certain things, right? Because we search for authenticity, and when we find it, we appreciate it more than other things. There's all kinds of used baseballs in the world, but there was only one used baseball that McGwire hit to hit his world record home runs. So we say our perception of authenticity makes a difference for us in how we see and how we value things. This is really important because this is God's eyesight. This is God's eyesight. He's looking for the authentic human being who loves him. There's millions of human beings, billions, but he's looking for authentic human beings to return love. Here's another example, right? Here's another example. Bottled water. How many people like to drink bottled water? I particularly don't care about bottled water myself. Okay. We generally like bottled water because we believe it is more pure than tap water. And we believe it tastes better, right? It's okay if you believe that. Most people do. And by the way, it's a $15 billion industry. Americans spend about $15 billion on bottled water every year. Americans spend more money on bottled water than they do on movie tickets. Bottled water costs more than gasoline by volume, and Americans drink more bottled water than milk or coffee, or milk and coffee altogether. How come? Because we believe it tastes good. That label on the front that says Perrier or whatever it says, we think, yeah, that makes it better, right? The enjoyment we get from something derives from what we think that thing is, right? What we think that thing is. If we think it's expensive bottled water, then we think that's better than cheap tap water. Bottled water supply is the purest example of Bloom's argument. Our partisans tout the superiority of Perrier water, or whatever their favorite brand of sparkling water happens to be, but as experiment after experiment demonstrates, give someone seltzer water, but tell them it's Perrier, and they'll wax ecstatic by the mineral springs of southern France. Is that interesting? Okay, listen to this. That it tastes better and is healthier than tap water is important to Bruce Nevins. You know who he is? He's the founder of Perrier in North America. On a radio show to promote his products, he was asked to do a taste test. He was given 7 glasses of water, asked to taste each one and tell which was Perrier and which was tap water with CO2 added. Needless to say, he failed the test 5 times in a row. Cannot figure it out. There's 7, so he's almost done, right? Finally, he got it right. On the 6th try, he got it right. So he missed 5 times before he got it right. And there's only 2 left. He had a 50-50 chance at that point. Perrier tastes good, right? If hot water with seltzer tastes good. Seltzer water, we like that. But it tastes better if you know and believe it's Perrier. Is that interesting? It tastes better. Even if it's not. You'll still think it tastes better. So our mind is a big part of who we are, and what gives us pleasure. What makes us happy. And what we live for and what we believe in. For example, like baseballs. If you bought a baseball thinking that it was Babe Ruth's 680th home run baseball, you would think it's quite valuable, right? You protect it, take care of it, etc. If you later discovered it was a fake, you would consider it worthless, even less than worthless. It's still the same baseball, still the same leather. Why? It's the same baseball it was before he found it was fake. Same weight, same color, same material. Because Babe had touched it that it was developed its value, its history, its authenticity. Well, I'll get to the point of this story in a second. Yeah.
Don't get mad at me. I just want to say that even happens in the church. You have the black some young book up on the shelf, and there were members that didn't buy it. They might not have had the money or anything, but they are now posting, looking for that because they want to compare it to the red book, and that black book has gone up $100 in value from its original price, just because they're not printing it anymore, and they're not going to print it anymore. So whoever has a copy.
I have one in my house too. Don't rob my house. Actually, this is 100% works with us. And by the way, next week's sermon is Day of All Things. I'll give this example, but I'll tell you now, right? If you have, John Kinney has all kinds of things that True Father touched, like what? Sign things like that, right? If you have a one of the things from Las Vegas, one of the bulletins, and Father signed it for you. There's 1 million bulletins out there. You throw them away. We got 20 of them. We don't need them. But if Father signed it, suddenly the value to us, because we believe, right? We believe in the authenticity of True Father, that is far more valuable than any other book or anything else. I would lose all my Jules Verne books, all the other books I have, if I could keep a book signed by True Father. That would be it. What if Jesus touched it? That's what the Holy Grail is all about. If the Holy Grail is a cup of that he shared with his disciples at the Last Supper. That's what the Holy Grail is, by the way. And everybody thought that if you could find that cup and you could drink anything out of it, it would heal everything on you, right? So it's okay to believe, by the way. It's a good thing, right? And I'll show you why it's a good thing. Why? Partly it's because it's called essence, right? We believe in the validity of something. Signatures in books. Something was owned and used by someone special. It was a family heirloom, for example. Something that was handed down from your family to you may not have any value to anybody else, but to you it's valuable. Here's an example. Let's try it. Keep going. See this?
Yeah.
This is an old jacket that's hanging in our garage, right? It's a valuable, precious piece of sentiment to me, right? It's sentimental value, because that's what Israel used to wear when he was a little boy, and he went everywhere with that, and it given to us. Grandpa gave it to his kids when we moved to Worcester, Mass, and all the kids wore them, so we keep it. Because why? It has sentimental value to me. Has sentimental value. I'm going to get into the reason why there's sentimental value and how valuable that is to us. How valuable it is. Watch, you'll see. Which brings us to the point of our sermon. Yes. And that is creating a rich spiritual atmosphere. A rich spiritual atmosphere is absolutely important for you, your children, and your grandchildren. It's absolutely important. Right? Our view of love and loving is very important to us, isn't it? Our view of love and loving is very important to us. Divine Principle explains that for you to grow spiritually, Divine Principle explains principle of creation, that you need to receive life elements. Life elements are, anybody got it? Life elements are love of God, right? Explains. Love of God is like the love of parents. If you don't receive that love, you won't grow. We know I've shown many sermons where children who do not receive love of their parents or love of God oftentimes run into serious emotional and psychological problems, right? But when children do receive a lot of love, they have a much better chance at life, right? Love, life elements, love, truth, and also this, it says a rich spiritual atmosphere in which good deeds take place, right? You have to also do good deeds. If you only receive love but you don't give out the love, then it doesn't do you any good. So Father says it's like a pond where nothing gets out. Nothing can live in that pond. You have to give out as well. So a rich spiritual atmosphere is an atmosphere surrounded by love, creativity, your heart, and in which you give out love, right? That's what we all wish our families to be, isn't it? Our families should all be like that. We say our physical body needs nutrients. Our physical body needs proteins. Vitamins are a type of protein. We need fats, especially omega-3 and 6. You've heard that probably in every commercial selling fish oil. Complex carbohydrates, vegetables, and you must do exercise. Even if you eat all the right foods, but you don't exercise. And what's the king of all exercises? Anybody know? Walking. Actually, cycling is pretty close. Cycling is better because you don't have low impact. Swimming's pretty good, except I don't know how to swim. So if you know how to swim, it's probably good. But listen, this is really important. You can do all these things, but you also need to have love for your physical body to grow healthy. Did you know that? People whose physical body grows healthy do better. There's what's called a new science of immunology, where they're discovering that people you love and who you love are very important to your body. For example, this is from Dr. Thomas Oxman and his colleagues at the University of Texas Medical School. Examine the relationship of social support and religion to mortality in men and women 6 months after undergoing elective open heart surgery. They asked 2 questions of the people who had just undergone open heart surgery. First, do you participate regularly in organized social groups such as clubs, church, synagogues, civic activities? That was number 1. And number 2, second question is, do you draw strength and comfort from your religion or spiritual faith, whatever religion or spiritual faith that might be? So it doesn't make so much difference which one, but do you draw spiritual strength from those activities, right? Reading the Bible or reading the Old Testament or whatever you do, you somehow draw strength from that, okay? It says this, they found that those who lacked regular participation in organized social groups had a 4-fold increase risk of dying 6 months after surgery. Is that shocking news? They're eating right, they're getting a health benefit, they're having operations, getting all the same medicines as everybody else, but they don't gain, spiritual strength or spiritual life elements into the body through their spirit. Right? So Father wrote the Divine Principle book 60 years ago, long before there was any new science of immunology. Nevertheless, we're discovering that he was absolutely correct. Controlling for medical factors that might have influenced survival, such as severity of heart disease, age, previous cardiac surgery, and so on. Also, they found that those who did not draw strength and comfort from their religion were 3 times more likely to die 6 months after surgery. People, even if you went to church, but you didn't like your church. I guess. These results indicated that lack of group participation and absence of strength and comfort from religion had independent and additive effects. It means it increased the mortality of people, right? Those who neither had regular group participation or drew strength and comfort from the religion were more than 7 times more likely to die 6 months after surgery. 7 times more likely to die in that time period. Now, this is from a book called Love, and Intimacy, and Health, and another book you should read to understand why love is important to us. It isn't just something we talk about or something we think about. Love is a real force. Love is a real help. Physically, it helps you, not the same as penicillin or other kinds of things, but love is really important for us to receive, right? And what does Jesus talk to us about? Love. What is True Father's most wonderful topic to talk about? True love, right? Not just love, but true love. Love and intimacy can have powerful effects on health and on our survival, even when the interventions are rather modest in intensity or duration. Okay, creating a rich atmosphere of sentiment is crucial to our life. It's crucial for our life, right? A rich spiritual atmosphere is full of love and truth. We should surround ourselves with reminders of love. I do, by the way. I found that this really helps me. For example, I keep photos, gifts, letters from friends and family, right? Siapa knows I have stacks and piles of those things. How come? Because it's meaningful to me. It's meaningful to me, and it's meaningful to people. And I'll show you why in a few minutes how important and serious this is. So I keep things for my kids, things for my friends. I keep everything, and I touch it, I look at it, I read it to try and stay strong. Father's Day cards for my kids. In short, we need to receive love on a regular basis to remain physically and emotionally, psychologically healthy. How do we get it, right? And so we say this, divine principle explains that the rule of give and take action is this, that in order for you to receive love, you have to give love first, right? That's the unfortunate rule. Fortunate or unfortunate rule, because most of us, most people on earth, would rather just receive love than give love first, right? Isn't it difficult to give love first? No, you guys find that easy? Just loving, easy, giving love easily to other people. No, we all know it's hard. This is what being a saint is. To give love first all the time is what a saint does. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. Because of the fall of man, it is much harder to communicate with God. Originally, our conscience would be wide open to God's suggestions for loving your spouse and your children. According to True Father, ideally, when you were married or you were a parent, then God would just tell you what to do. Bring flowers home to your wife today because your wife is having a hard time. You would just know from God to do that. Or to the wives, he would say something like, whatever, I don't know what he'd say to the wives. Be nicer or whatever, something, I don't know. But the point is, we would have some way to know what to give and when to give it. Because we had an open relationship with God. Obviously, because of the fall of man, it's harder for us to figure that out, right? It's much harder for us to figure that out. That's what the fall of man is about. For example, us men, we would understand the femininity of our wives and daughters by communicating with the femininity of God. It's hard. Do most men here have a good relationship with the femininity of God? No, I mean men. Yeah, a woman would, and that's because you're feminine. But men, what? Femininity of God? Yeah? It should be, yes. We know God intimately, and we know the feminine side of God intimately. Reverend Moon does. Do we? We can hear his words, and ideally, by hearing his words, we get some education, and we begin to pray and understand and study what that means, the femininity of God, right? And we have now True Mother. So our church leadership has changed from father and sons to mother and daughter. Right? So ideally, we should be able to learn that a little bit before we go to the other side of other side. So the new science of love looks like this. This is by Sue Johnson. She studied about love and people who were deprived of love and how it would hurt them so much. For example, after interviewing prisoners of war who were subjected to tortures and to solitary confinement, she asked them, how did they survive that? How did they not go insane or crazy or kill themselves? Because some people did kill themselves, unfortunately, right? How did they do it? You know what they said? They said this. They said memories of love. In their most dark and most bleak times, they would remember their mother's love. They remember their wives or their children's love or their friends' love or their buddies who were army men And they would remember that, and they would go over in their mind over and over again the loving experiences they had growing up. So this is important because this love is what allowed them to survive horrible circumstances. It was the memories of love. So our memories of love are really crucial and vitally important to us as well. That's why we should keep a rich spiritual atmosphere around us that reminds us of the love of God, true parents, Jesus. Right? We should always have something that reminds us of the love of God. We should be able to see and feel the love of God regularly. That's what a rich spiritual atmosphere is for. That's why we put true parents' pictures here, Jesus' picture. We put all the holy books here. Why? So we're always reminded of the love of Jesus. Of course, you have to open the books up in order to really get the main point, right? That's why Father said, when Father was passing away, he said, the greatest gift I leave to you is, anybody remember? It wasn't a blessing, it was Handa Kwe. He said, the greatest gift I leave to you is Handa Kwe. Read my words. Read my words. Read my words. And remember, the purpose of your life is true love. Remember, the purpose of your life is to love God with your whole heart and soul and mind. Remember, the purpose of your life is to love your spouse to perfection. The purpose of your life is to love your children, right? Same words of Jesus, same idea, same foundation of Jesus. We have true parents. We have each other as friends and family. That's why we come to church, to remind ourselves of what's important in life. And also our tribe is important. That's why a rich spiritual atmosphere will include your spiritual children, your friends, your family, people you love, your spiritual parents ideally, and all those elements. All these things are life-giving to us, are life-giving, and we need to have give and take with them to stay alive. We need to have that give and take action. Number 2, be kind to one another. Just like if you want your physical body to remain healthy, you have to exercise. If you want your spiritual and emotional relationship with your spouse or family you have to exercise being kind. You have to exercise being kind to one another, right? I read this from Reverend Mark Gungor. Anybody heard Reverend Mark Gungor? Yeah. This is from his website, and I was reading through some of the things he wrote, and this is one of the things he wrote. As a pastor and counselor and family coach, here's what he says. He says, Reverend Mark Gungor's Laugh Your Way to a Better Marriage, it says, he is shocked that husbands and wives sometimes say things to each other that they would never say to a friend or even a stranger. Right? You guys can't relate to that, but in his church, he found that husbands and wives sometimes yell at each other or say things to each other or call each other names that you wouldn't call a friend or a coworker or a stranger on the street, but some people would say those things to their husbands or wives. Right? He said, don't do that. Don't do that. We should at least treat our spouse like a stranger. At least we shouldn't go below that level, right? At least we shouldn't go below that level. So how do we remember to give love and forgive and reconcile regularly? Again, Father gave us the Handa Kwe. Read the Gospels. Read the Divine Principle book. Read all these things. Read the other holy textbooks. That's why Father left all these textbooks. He said, this is my great gift to you. So you won't forget, and you won't forget who you are as a human being. You won't forget the authenticity of your being a child of God, and you won't forget the authenticity of your wife, your spouse, your children being children of God. Because in this fallen world, separated from God by the fall of man, you might forget. And you might see things as not as valuable as they are, right? You might see things as a fake baseball instead of a real baseball, as a fake human being instead of a real one. Also, I suggest there's other books, secular books, such as How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's really a great book. You should read it. Simply about how to be nice to people, how to win friends. Shouldn't your spouse be a friend? Shouldn't your kids be your friends? Absolutely. Criticism, anger, and withdrawal, right? These are the big problems of human society, and oftentimes it's our problems too, right? I get angry. However, we just get one chance at life, right? Learning to forgive, learning to express love is our only hope in this life, by the way, right? two typical Cain-like responses to feeling hurt and or feeling a lack of love. Don't we feel lack of love sometimes? I admit, sometimes I do. Sometimes I do. Two responses usually. One, first is Cain-like anger. Like that lady whose child was lost. Her feeling was Cain-like anger. Kill the child. Kill it. It's okay with me. Kill. Right? To lash out and try to hurt the other so they know they're hurt first. So we know we're hurting. Like the lady was hurting. Her child had died. She's hurt. So she wants to lash out and hurt somebody to communicate her pain. Does that make sense? That's a typical way human beings react. Because we've come from the fall of man, unfortunately, sometimes we react that way. Number two, biblically we say Cain or Esau or Absalom, right? Biblically, Cain lashed out when he didn't feel love. When Esau didn't feel love or blessed by his father, what did he do? He lashed out. He wanted to kill his brother Jacob. Or Absalom, when he didn't feel loved by his father, he didn't get David's blessing, then he lashed out and in fact started a war, right? Started a war. What's the other kind of way, which is probably actually a little worse, and that is when we receive criticism, anger, or withdrawal, the second method is to withdraw. The second method is to withdraw, which is in some ways worse, right? To leave the relationship, not physically but spiritually or emotionally. Actually, I would always give the example of this. I don't know if I did it here. No, I didn't. But people who withdrew from others. For example, Korah, during Moses' course, Korah said, forget it. I'm not going to go to war with you, Moses, but I'm going home. I'm just going to take my stuff and go home. Completely wrong from Moses and God's perspective. Number two, when Jesus was the Messiah, the Christ, who let him down worse? We all know, right? Who? John the Baptist. How did John the Baptist hurt Jesus? He just didn't do anything.
Yeah, he didn't have a bridge to the Israelites.
Exactly right. He just ignored Jesus. He just ignored him. That's another very painful thing, right? When we are ignored by somebody, it's better to feel fighting with somebody than to be ignored by somebody, right? But when John the Baptist ignored Jesus' position, then there was nothing but pain for the kingdom of heaven. And pain for Jesus and eventually pain for John the Baptist. Sometimes in our lives, in our relationships, when we don't feel loved, we withdraw. Say, forget you. I don't care anymore. I don't want to be with you anymore. Even though we might be there physically, spiritually we're not there. So learning to forgive, learning to express love is our only hope. There's just one chance at life, right? We have to make a safe place for each other. We have to make it safe for people to be here. We have to make it safe so when people want to be with you, because they feel safe, right? If you want to spend more time and activity with your spouse, family, friends, you have to make it a safe, stimulating place to be around you. That's really essential. That's who we're trying to become, to create a rich spiritual atmosphere, right? So we say you have to go out of your way to be kind to your family and to your tribe. That's an essential message of true parents and Jesus Christ. Amen?
Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you weren't bored. But that's the end of our sermon. Thank you.